Great, thanks everyone. Welcome to the regular monthly meeting of the Nantucket Historical Commission. I'm Hillary Rayport, Chair of the Commission, and I just want to remind everybody that we're meeting remotely by Zoom under the governor's orders. The meeting is being recorded. Just be aware that anything might be captured by the recording. All the votes will be by roll call. I'm going to go ahead and confirm that everybody can hear me and confirm that the members of the commission are here. So starting with Mickey Rowland.
Here.
Tom Montgomery.
Here.
Angus McLeod.
Here.
Barbara White. Thanks.
Here.
Thank you, Barbara. And we have special guest Betsy Tyler and Ken Bogrand.
Present.
And Mary Bergman is also joining us as a guest.
Yep, hi.
Hi, and our staff liaison, Town Preservation Planner, Holly Bacchus.
Good morning.
Great, thanks everyone. So I didn't hear back from David Silver. Hopefully David will be joining. I might send him a text, but if not, we'll just forge ahead and figure the minutes out as we go along. So I'd like to start off by saying that we have Ken only for a little bit of time this morning. Ken, how long will you be able to join us?
I'll have to leave about 10:30.
Okay. So Ken wanted to get oriented with our 2022 work plan. So that's at the end of the agenda, and I wanted to know if everybody was okay with moving that up, just so we could talk about that and get feedback and comments from the town through Ken. Would that be okay?
Fine with me.
Fine with me.
Okay, great. Hi, Georgia, welcome.
Oh, hello. Nice to be here, everybody.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and make that change. But in the meantime, I don't see anybody here for public comment, but I just want to make sure that there's nobody wanting to make a public comment. Okay, hearing none. Could I ask if everyone had a chance to review the minutes of our December 17th meeting and if there's any comments? Or a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor to accept our minutes? Mickey?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Angus?
Aye.
Georgia?
Hi.
And I'm an aye. Thank you. So let's talk about the 2022 work plan. So we have on our agenda 4 bullet points of items that when we worked on this back in September and October, we talked about what might be areas of focus of work for our commission in this year. And that we, with the idea that we would, discuss these, present these to the select board in the town. So this agenda just lists these items. It doesn't really explain these items. So I wanted to take a minute just for the benefit of our discussion and for the benefit of anybody watching in the public to understand what we had thought merited some attention. So I'm going to quickly go through and explain the 4 bullet points, and please feel free to interject with questions or additional comments. And then I'd like to hear comments from Ken because he had discussed these with Libby and had some specific questions. Preservation plan for town-owned historic resources. So the comment that we gave when we met with the select board about this in October was that the town owns, obviously one of the primary objectives of and priorities of our commission are surveys of historic resources, because you can't preserve anything if you haven't surveyed it. An extension of survey activity is a preservation plan, which is now that you know what you have, how do you want to account for it as the community evolves and land use evolves? We, as a commission, had discussed that the town owns many buildings and objects and lands that have historic attributes, and that it would be helpful for our commission to assist the town in identifying contributing features, or if a building does not have contributing features, also identifying that, because the town is in the middle of a facilities management exercise. So obviously we have an initiative to survey the entire island, but that understanding, evaluating, and taking steps to preserve the town-owned resources is something that is within the town's control. And so conducting surveys of these buildings and commenting on them would be important. So we've requested that Holly provide a list of the resources, which she said she has. Angus and I just discussed this with her last Friday. And the intention was to discuss this and get comments and flesh this out a little bit more and figure out how we might do it. The second bullet point, initiate discussion with tribes and state archaeologists. So the idea here is that we have a strong Native history on Nantucket. There was an enormous population of Native Americans living on Nantucket when Europeans arrived. We have many rich archaeological lands which are eligible under the criteria for individual listing on the National Register. Although we haven't elected, the owners have not agreed to list them. So there are many resources, and we felt that it was within our purview and made sense just to kind of figure out what questions we might want to ask. How do we bring a Native voice to this? In conversation, oh, and I should mention that Susan Handy, our trained archaeologist, is expected to join today, but she is going to be joining a little bit later because she's on the West Coast. So this is really kind of an exploration and conversations. We did have conversations with Mary Lynn Rainey, who is the archaeologist most familiar with Nantucket and working on Nantucket today. And she directed us to talk to the tribes because it is very difficult, and in fact, against her professional code of conduct to discuss archaeological lands with us. So we need to find out what the tribes would like. So those were initial discussions that we wanted to have happen. Assess archival needs with respect to historic town records. So there is a very successful initiative to preserve deeds that was funded by the CPC. I've reviewed and read that grant. And there are other records as well. So this initiative was just, let's figure out what historic documents exist so that we can start to formulate an opinion about their condition and whether or not there should be additional efforts to have a town archive. Beyond deeds, understanding that the Office of Deeds is really well covered. But all kinds of things could be in a town archive. So this was an exploration just to list what those things might be. And we might find that there are none, but I actually doubt that because I think there are a lot of select board minutes and things from way, way back. And then the last was the concept for a small loan fund. This would be modeled on the project in Arlington that has been going on since the 1980s. But I've been talking now for some time and I want to make sure to leave time to hear from Ken. So Ken, we can answer questions about the idea of a small loan fund. I did email you about it and have had conversations about it with Mary over the past, I don't know, probably the summer before last. So I couldn't find those emails, but anyway. So those were, I hope it helps to hear a little bit about what these projects were. And I'm gonna yield the floor to whoever would like to comment. Barbara. Oh, we can't hear you, Barbara.
Can you now?
Yes.
I met with Nancy Holmes, the town clerk, twice in the past week or so about digitizing records. And there were some Catherine Stover undertook several preservations. One was in the 90s and one was in, I think, 2006, where they bound some. Some of the records are now in, I'm talking mostly here, town meeting records, select board records. I don't know about the birth and death records. We didn't get that far. And some have been put in preservative sleeves. But they would, according to Nancy, they would welcome any kind of digitization. They are scanning now, going back until the 70s, various board minutes, particularly, I think, zoning. But when I said to her, how about really ancient documents, the most ancient we have, they would welcome anything that could be done, because now they're not searchable. So I think that, anyhow, I had a positive response.
That's great. I'm so glad to hear that you were able to talk with Nancy about this. Tom?
You mentioned a minute ago, there was a woman that was professionally involved with the tribes and state archaeologists who couldn't speak about that kind of stuff.
She's not the state, or there is a state archaeologist. She's actually a consultant. She works at PAL, but she's worked on Nantucket for years. And it's a code of conduct in archaeology that you can't talk about specific locations because all of this is secret.
Okay, so locations, that's what I was wondering. Yeah, okay.
Just, Madam Chair, if it,
Yes,
if
of
I may,
course.
when it comes to archaeology and when it comes to the tribes are technically their own federal organization. They are, they have special governmental authority when it comes to any discussion. So for instance, when they are involved with Section 106, for instance, we as other consulting parties are not privy to those specific negotiations that happen because it's very secretive. It has to be for certain reasons. And then when on the archaeology aspect, the last thing we want is archaeological sites, features, what have you, to be looted. Not to say that that's what people do, but we know that happens. So there's that protectiveness, if you will, when it comes to archaeology and even in the tribes. It needs to be respected.
Thank you, Holly. I want to talk about the tribes, but I want to make sure we finish the discussion about the archive. Ken, did you want to make comments about the town archive and Nantucket's archival records?
Sure. I'll be happy to talk to the four issues. As I indicated in a memo that I sent to you, the concern that I had was the word initiate preservation plan for town-owned historic resources. I divided it between two things, the town buildings and then town resources. I'm not aware of any historic town buildings that the town has. And with respect to the historic resources, a plan was developed, as Barbara was pointing out, that was started by Catherine Stover with respect to items relative to deeds, but also more importantly, with respect to the town records, which in fact, separate funding has been given to the town clerk. And it is the view of the town that is a town clerk's project. And if the town clerk wants to expand it or move forward with it, that's the area that should be driving that particular process, as opposed to providing a second or third initiative relative to the same events that we're trying to, or issues that we're trying to resolve. With respect to the tribes and the state archaeologists, there were several reasons why I think that is inappropriate for the Historical Commission to take a look at. Number one, the town does not have an archaeological bylaw. Secondly, the initiative with respect or discussions with the tribes, because as Holly pointed out, they are a separate federal entity, is generally done with the state. And thirdly, any initiative with respect to a discussion should come from the select board as opposed to providing a direction and an understanding of what is sought to be achieved and what the risks are involved of opening the door as to issues which are dormant at this point in time, but which might come to the service, which might not necessarily benefit the town from the town's point of view. I don't know that that's the case, but that's one of the concerns. The third with respect to is the access, where it says access archival needs with respect to historic town records. Not clear what that means, whether that is a question of how to access it or what was being driven there, because in fact, as far as I'm aware, all of the documentation, as Betty has shown, is available for anybody that comes in to take a look at it and is readily made available. Hearing from her with respect to the needs that Nancy is talking about with respect to digitization and stuff like that, I will spend some time with her as chair of the CPC to help her initiate a funding request to be able to provide funding for that initiative. And then with respect to the small loan fund, my current concerns, as I expressed to you, was the fact that without a clear understanding of the purpose of the fund, but secondly, more importantly, without the ability to know that there are staff and funding available to, in fact, manage this and monitor it, I think it's very difficult to start to think about creating an initiative where there's not then going to be the ability to, in fact, have it function because of the lack of limited resources and limited funds with respect to that are available altogether in the town relative to the prioritization of where staff and funding is going. So those were the concerns that I tried to express to you in the memo, why I thought that those were not necessarily the initiatives that should be moving forward in the way that I thought that they were and understood them to be.
Barbara, go ahead.
Not talking about archives here, but when we talk about historic sites in our plan, this is more of a question. It's not limited to buildings, is it? Because the town owns historic cemeteries. I'm assuming the Civil War monument would be something the town owns and is historic, and that needs to be surveyed. I'm thinking that what we're talking about, the whole island plan, I'm just asking, we're not limited to buildings, I do not believe, but I don't know.
No, it's a comprehensive survey, not limited to buildings. But also so what I understand, Ken, that you're saying is that the town does not own historic buildings. And I mean, the town owns many historic buildings.
Yes. I will, I can jump in here. I have started a list. I don't have, it's not complete, but we all know, for instance, the old fire station downtown, that's a historic resource. We know that the Jetties Beach Pavilion by Peabody and Stearns, we know that's a historic resource. There's also some other outbuildings that were created for Jetties Beach that are actually listed. And there are quite a few records on file of structures. So it would be beneficial to have a list so that way town admin, the select board is aware of what our town resources are. You talk about the Civil War monument. There's other monuments that are within town right away that are actually there's record back with town meeting warrants that we know that those features are actually owned by the town. So yes, there are things that our survey plan can actually pick up. Remember that the survey plan is not only just for Form Bs for buildings, but there's also Form As, Bs, Cs, Ds, areas that will give us an idea of what we do have as a resource. And I also wanted to, there is a little bit of confusion on what a preservation plan is. Our preservation plans can be big or small. I will direct you to the PDF that I shared through the CLG. from MHC and the CLG's state coordinator. Preservation plans can be big or small. And technically our survey plan that PAL is currently working on, that they're establishing for us, is a type of preservation plan. They can, again, they can be something that is associated with a master plan, but they can also be something just as simple as identifying and prioritizing our historic resources. So I just wanted to clarify that for everybody.
Thank you, Holly. That's very helpful. And I want to stress that these are explorations. So we're, asking questions, developing ideas, getting feedback. And, if we're being advised to take all of these things off our agenda, it's impossible for us to discuss them because we can only discuss things that are, on our agenda. Yes, Holly.
Thank you. As far as the discussion about the archival needs, when that was originally discussed by you all late last year, I did mention that the late Catherine Stover did start that when she was our town clerk, our beloved town clerk, who we miss quite a bit. But obviously thankful that Nancy has taken the helm. I'm glad to hear that, that's something that Ken had mentioned. He is chair of the CPC. If that's something that the town clerk's office wants to continue on, but also listening from what Barbara had mentioned, she spoke to Nancy. Maybe it can be a collaboration, but I do agree that it does need to be something that the town clerk's office is initiating. They're the ones who started the initiation of doing digital or doing the archival needs. But I do understand what Ken is saying. So maybe this is something that we can facilitate a little bit more with the town clerk's office. What could this commission, from a preservation perspective, assist in if it's something that they are not currently doing, if that makes any sense. Whether it's having information available to researchers. We don't have a town archivist, but I would really like to say that our town clerk's office is that first step when it comes to research. And I know Barbara's done it, I know Betsy's done it. Being able to go into our town building and not just the registry of deeds, because that's a state owns organization, if you will. But when it comes to actual town documents, I do think that they've done a fantastic job of providing access to the public. And in this digital age, in archival needs, again, what are the needs of the town clerk in providing additional information in addition to what the late Catherine Stover has done?
Yeah, so I just want to emphasize, that's why Barbara's first call was to the town clerk to say, so what is there, what's left to do, what help can we offer? It just seems like on the one hand, the claim of, oh, well, we're understaffed, we don't have resources to support this or that. And then on the other hand, but don't get involved because it's not your business. And I just want to be really clear that as the historical commission, this is what we're appointed to do, and it's of broad interest to the voters. So I'm sorry if that feels a little sharp, but it's just, if we're asked to take things off our agenda, it really does mean that we're asked to shut down discussion of items. Yes, Tom.
Well, I don't mean to, how shall I phrase this? No, I'm not going to make the comment. Never mind.
Angus?
Hi, I would love to get Susan Handy's comments, and I'm glad she's joining soon. But since she's the archaeologist on our board, but one thing that stands out to me that Ken had mentioned is just about the town not having an archaeological bylaw, and I'm just curious why. It seems like that would be a core thing that the town would have already had. So I'm just curious why we don't have that.
I have no response to that. And because I have to leave quickly, I'm going to respond to Hillary's comments. I think that this discussion has been useful in the sense that it has identified areas that are not currently covered with respect to plans in place. And so I think with respect to those things that we talked about, that Holly mentioned, that is something that clearly is worthwhile exploring in terms of developing a proposal with how to address it. I think with respect to that was on the first point with relative to the initiating preservation plans. I think the reasons that I've stated with respect to the dealing with the tribes, I don't have any further comment on that. The town administration feels fairly strongly on that. With respect to the accessing the archival records, the comments that were just made in terms of working together with the town clerk to see what can do forward, that makes sense in terms of moving forward. And no further comments with respect to the issue of the creation of the small fund because of staffing and budget there. So hopefully that further that refines the request that I presented to you in terms of the areas that I think are appropriate to moving forward with removing some of the areas where there already exists plans as with respect to that. So I don't know if that's helpful.
You,
You're
Thank you,
muted.
Ken. And I just want to emphasize that, we're all appointed by the select board, and we work to protect the interest of the town regarding historic resources. And everything we do, we want to do transparently, respectfully, and keeping people informed. So, that's so keeping, communication with the select board, part of the way we do that is by having a liaison with the select board. And what I would ask if we could do, and I know we have to let you go, Ken, is, maybe we could give some additional details about our thinking. We're not going to negotiate with the tribes about anything. And this is never the intent to have a negotiation. This has nothing to do with Section 106 reviews. We really, the impetus of it was acknowledgement of native lands and guidance for the public that might be interested in archaeology, and really not wanting to do that in any way that didn't acknowledge the native voice and the right of native people to be the leaders in that conversation. We might find that we cannot engage and that nothing comes of it, but we feel that given our marching orders and what we do includes archaeology, that we had to make some effort. We had to do something, we couldn't do nothing. So we're going to figure out what that might be. And I hope that we can continue to keep everyone informed and just approach this all with the spirit of collaboration and transparency.
Understood.
Okay, thank you, and congratulations on the groundbreaking of 31 fairgrounds.
We're going to have heads in beds by this summer. So,
oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Great work.
Anyway, thank you. Right.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
again.
Okay. Are there any other discussions about, well, the work plan? Maybe we should get on to some of the other things that we had on our agenda, and then we can talk about specifics later, unless there's any other comments that anybody wanted to make about our conversation. No, seeing none. Okay. All right, so I'll share our packet if I can find it. I hope this is it. Yes, okay. So I just wanted to, Holly and I wanted to share, and Angus wanted to share these letters. We had the folks from Gull Island raise their hand and ask for renewal of our support. We felt that because we had mentioned use of the project at 2 Mayflower, when we decided that in our December meeting, that we had to also do that for this letter. And we found a way to do that, that wasn't kind of making a new decision, because obviously we'd have to get a vote of the commission. So hopefully that's all acceptable to everybody. So these are in their FYI. And now let's move on to the advised surveys of the MHC advised surveys of historic resources. So I shared the interim report from PAL. I do want to mention that Holly went through this report and made detailed comments for our consultant. Thank you, Holly, including catching typos. And I didn't put that in the packet, but I wanted to give everybody, I hope you've had a chance to look through this. I wanted to collect the commission's comments on this. I think the most, well, why don't I just let go of the mic and let anybody comment? I can navigate to the area that you wanted to comment on. And Holly, if you want to give an introduction to this too, please jump in.
Sure, I can start off. So first off, if anybody has not been privy to this type of process, it's very prescriptive. And again, we're very, very fortunate to have a consultant who's done this. They know what they're doing. They know what the MHC is looking for. They know how to cross their T's, dot their I's, so to speak. So really and truly, I was looking at this from a not only typos, name, place, incorrect spellings, but also obviously some substantive things. Really, I mean, it targeted on here, there was a little bit of misunderstanding about the effort to update the NHL that NPT received CPC funds for. That was done in 2012. So I actually sent PAL a copy of the actual National Park Service's certificate of the approval of the update to the NHL, which I actually have proudly on my wall. I received that from Nancy Holmes when I was inquiring about it a couple of years ago. So there are things like that that I annotated in here. Really, they're following the RFQ. I did want them to understand that any of the dates that are associated with structures that they may find on the tax assessor's records online, or even within our NHL document that's about 400 pages long that the National Park Service did with that update. A lot of that was done at what we call windshield survey. Just had a little caveat on there, like I have on our document online for folks, that don't go by those dates, 100% accurate. They have a note on there. So I just wanted them to understand that we do have a caveat to dates. Again, I did, when you look, I really do think that the commission needs to look at the neighborhoods that we've given them to outline. If there's anything that you really think that could be looked upon, I gave a couple of examples, specifically out in Pulpus. So I live out in Pulpus. I drive by about 3 or 4 historic structures that I know do not have even in 1989 HDC survey done on them. So obviously those to catch within the plan. So when we come up with that phased approach on hopefully each year on those specific areas, we can make sure that those are targeted. But really I would recommend taking a look at, if you haven't already, the descriptions, making sure that actually meets your understanding of those areas. Let's see, really and truly, and I gave them some additional resource information that I uploaded to them. I did mention too, with Surfside, for instance, they wanted to know what about South Shore Road. Personally, this is just as an island resident here. I do think that South Shore Road has the Badlands, as it's called, does have its own unique personality description, if you will, and it's not really associated with either Maya Comet or Surfside. It's its separate entity, so that should be taken out. There was a notation about the life-saving station, as we know, that was owned by the youth hostels. I just corrected them and clarified that it's not currently owned by them anymore, but there is a preservation restriction that's actually held by NPT. Thank you, NPT. Just some specific information, really, truly. But I would like you all to look at those areas that because again, at the end of the day, this plan is going to go by these areas that we've identified as a group, and we want to make sure that obviously, when I look at Nantucket, I don't think of lines drawn in the sand of areas. They've formed, what's that word? Organically. They have not been prescriptive divided out. Yes, there's areas that have been subdivided, if you will, over time, but Nantucket's evolution is more of an organic structure. So sometimes some areas that we've described may not necessarily follow the way that, say, MHC may have had on their recognizance survey that they did in the 80s. So those are things that, again, PAL is an expert on. They have a lot of their own resources on Nantucket. And with that, that's it. This is just a report that they're required to do. And I think this is good. I'm very excited. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Holly. I see Tom has a hand up.
This is just a comment on what Holly just said. I've always prided myself in, pretty much knowing Nantucket backwards and forwards, but maybe I'm showing my age here. I'd never heard of Kilimanjaro.
I know. We have to find out where that came from.
I'd like to know where that is.
Tom, that was one of my comments to them, but I did mention that I've always known about Bean Hill at the height
If that's what they're calling Bean Hill, okay. But
right, exactly. So I don't know. I asked that as well. Thank you for bringing that up.
They must have gotten it out of some book somewhere. We'll have to ask them.
Pretty low standards if Bean Hill is Kilimanjaro.
So I think it would be as Holly pointed out, the areas, the neighborhoods are going to be the framework that we're going to fill in. So think of this as a painting, and we have these areas that we've identified, and we're going to fill in with the detail. So it's very valuable to give feedback if some areas maybe shouldn't be areas, or if there's something that's missed. These areas were, so Tom and Barbara and Betsy and I got together and made a list that we forwarded to Holly, and Holly reviewed and augmented and corrected, and then we sent this to the consultants. And they have this very cool tool on their iPad. They can kind of map out, this is all being done with GIS. And they draw the neighborhoods, and then they can locate the properties. They can, they've got digital maps in this tool. They can locate the properties within the neighborhoods. So the next step, our next survey grant is due February 7th. And we're going to need to specify what neighborhoods we want to work on. Now, we don't have to have it set in stone. Obviously, we want the advice from our consultant. We don't have that yet. We have to apply. It has to be in the hands at the office February 7th. So one of the things I hope we can discuss during this meeting is the areas, but also what should be like maybe the top 3 priorities for the next next round of grants that we're applying for. So the next year's work, 2022 to 2023. So that being said, here are the areas: Coatue, Great Point and Coscata, Wauwinet, Pulpus, Quays, Pocomo, Quidnet, and Squam, which they've kind of lumped together. The Bogs, Middle Moors, which they're identifying as the north side of Milestone Road, Sconset. You can see here where what they've identified as Sconset. Tom Nevers, Matacasham, Airport, Old South Road area, which includes Camp Richards and Lovers Lane, the streets around there. Naushop being its own subdivision. You know, we should probably at least mention, we don't need to do a detailed plan, but Richmond. I mean, that's a hugely important development that should be noted in our survey plan as non-contributing, but nonetheless transformative. I'm going to put that down, mention Richmond. So Shakmo, Shimo, Monomoy, Surfside, and this is how we've described this. I'm assuming you guys can all read this and that you'll just call out if there's anything you want to say.
Hillary,
Yeah.
you're showing on the screen the agenda, and I don't know if
Oh,
you're.
no.
Thank you for
I
that.
was trying to follow along on the separate
Oh my
thing
goodness. I've
for the
been,
map.
okay. Hang
I was
on.
gonna
I
say
don't know.
that, but
Oh, thank you for telling me. I've been showing this thing the whole time. And okay, can you see a table with neighborhoods?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Oh my goodness. This whole time I was hoping that people could be looking at this. All right. Well, anyway, you probably printed it out. Okay. So for the benefit of everybody, we have Cotu, Great Point, Coscata, Wawinit, Pulpus, Quays, Pocomo, Quidnet, Boggs, Middle Moors, Sconset, Tom Nevers, Matacasham, Airport, which we're going to add to includes Richmond development, Naushop, Shakmo, Shimo, Monomoy, Surfside, My Comet, both sides of My Comet Pond, archaeological sites, Ladies Beach area out to Bartlett Farm, Cisco. Now, this mention of farms, this is something the consultant added in. I don't think that was on our list unless Holly, you called that out.
no.
But I think they've decided that farms need their own, I mean, they're going to find it overlaps with other areas.
I agree with this, and there's actually information on it. There's an 1850s map I actually have on my wall by William Gardner, 1846, actually 1845. It's really cool. Actually, we have a link to it on the HDC's webpage to go right to the NHA's file on it. So yes, definitely farms are part of, I think, Nantucket's agricultural history that is important to identify. So yes, I actually encourage keeping that on there.
Okay, great. South of Cliff Road, and they want to define this a little bit more. So if anybody has comments on that, between Cliff Road and Mattocket Road, east to New Lane, and we have part 1 and 2, New Lane and North Liberty Street. Brant Point and Cliffside, including Cobblestone Hill, the Cliff area, north side of Cliff Road to Bluff, from Sherburne Turnpike to Kite Hill Road, including all properties above the bluff. Cliff Road West, Washing Pond, including Tuppence Links, Dionys Eel Point, Moors, the Moors off Mattocket Road. Head of the Plains, Fisher's Landing, its own subdivision, Mattocket divided into east and west, Tristram's Landing, Millbrook Road, Deer Run Road, Burnt Swamp Road, Upper Vestal, hopefully Holly caught the typo, Dukes Road, Mid Island, Mill Hill, Quaker Road, Prospect Hospital, Hooper Farm Road, Fairgrounds Road, Rugged Road, Amelia Drive, commercial area, Mid Island, West Monomoy, Guinea, New Guinea, Newtown, Lower Orange Street, Consu Springs, Orange Street and side streets off Orange, Pleasant Street, Lily Street, Gardner Street, Main Street from the Civil War Monument, Broad Street to Easton Street, commercial downtown, and waterfront. So these are all areas that would have their own description and would be filled in with surveys over the years in our survey plan. Yes, Tom.
A couple of comments. Monomoy in Monomoy, as we know it with the harbor, for the people who may come after us, 50 years from now, I think they ought to differentiate between Monomoy, that Monomoy, and the Monomoy they used to call is adjacent to the fish lots and more closer to town. And in some research that I was doing after we had that meeting at your house between Barbara and Betsy and you and I, Betsy and I were interested in something, and we both kind of researched it with a lot of her information from the library. And I think that quays ought to be broken up into 3 parts: west quays, middle quays, and east quays, because each of them has a history of its own. And it's one of the earliest parts of the island. As a matter of fact, that's what Thomas Mayhew saved for himself. And there were reasons for that. I'm not going to go into all that right now, but there's a lot more to quays than you think. There was a tea room there, and it's a very interesting how it all developed. It was considered some of the best land on Nantucket because it was really good farmland for some reason.
Would that be part of Pulpus, like West Pulpus, Middle Pulpus, East Pulpus? Or, I mean, is it its own group quays?
That's a good question, Angus. But because Pulpus can be on both sides of the road, and quays is only north of the main road against the harbor, I think even the earliest people differentiated it as that.
I noticed that part about the bogs. I mean, when I think of the moors, I think about the area that the bogs, is labeled bogs. I'm wondering if we should do Westmore and Eastmore. I mean, the bogs are certainly a central theme in that area marked as bogs, but it's not just bogs.
I agree with you. I don't think of the moors. No, they're called middle moors too, and they take walks on the moors. I don't think it's boggy at all out there. Well, certainly not much, except for the cranberry bogs, which are being not used anymore.
I was going to ask when you were talking about quays, when you go down the Quays Harbor Road there, I don't know if that's the name of it. On the right, as you go in, there's an old house that at one point was a dance hall, and there's actually springs in the second floor for people dancing. And I don't know if that's Quays or Pulpus in this.
Well, so what you're talking about is the road to Quays is the one
Yeah.
on the second one down if you're going out of town, and then you've got Bassett Road before that.
Yeah.
And there's that little pond, and there's a big rock there. And in a lot of the very old descriptions of quays, they use that rock as a demarcation line for a lot of different things. As a matter of fact, the asylum used to be there between the pond and the street. And I believe that it was probably not the original building, but it was moved to town to where the Landmark House is now.
Well,
Yes.
the Quays Asylum is on the other side of Pulpus Road because there's a cemetery there marking it.
Right.
And you got to remember that Pulpus Road wasn't where it is now.
Correct.
Makes it complicated.
But that's what I'm saying. There's a lot more to quays than meets the eye. A Dorcas Honorable, the very last Indian on Nantucket, died at the asylum. And so I think we need to look into that a little bit closer.
So what I'll add is that the survey plan will identify areas with descriptions of the areas, and then those areas will be given as projects to consultants under future, as we progress through surveying the island. And then that consultant, when they have that area, they will do a whole report just on that area. So I think if an area is large enough that it should be its own study and distinct enough, then it should be its own study. But if there's, I mean, some of this is like these neighborhoods have distinctive characteristics, and some of it is geographic. And you know, how many properties will be, you know, how many Form Bs are going to be generated within the area, or is it the consultant will tell us, well, it should be an area plan, and there's, because there are not that many Form Bs, or we need to do individual surveys and call out each individual structure, or it should be some kind of combination. I'm just a little, I don't want to try to do the consultant's work for them, I guess is what I'm saying.
I think if we, when we work on the next request of funding, that we make it clear that we're wanting the consultant to provide that. We leave flexibility for them to say, you know what, this area that you've all identified actually does need an area form as well as individual. I think we can leave that flexibility in there.
Okay, and I'm wondering, Tom, you know, it sounds like you have a lot of specific information. I mean, would you be able to write that up and send it to them? Or do you have?
I think that Betsy is the better person for that, because she's the one that provided me with some of that information, and she's got it all right there. I'd be glad to do it, but I got a lot of. Well, how we started off, I was curious about, as you're going down the low part there, where Folger Creek is, where the Life-Saving Museum is. If you look over to the right, way in the back, there's an old farmhouse with two chimneys. Which
The lean-to, I love that one. Sorry.
So that was a Folger house, and I was curious as to whether it was related to Peter Folger, who he was the guy that could speak Wampanoag when the first settlers came here and could talk to the Indians. And we were trying to determine whether or not that was related to him. And that got us going with so many other things in Quays itself that, you know, it kind of got lost in the translation. But that's how it all started. But I know that Betsy has a great deal of information on what I just told you.
Betsy.
One thing about
Oh, sorry. Can we just let Betsy respond, Angus?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Hi. I did a report on the field station property. So I researched virtually all of Quays, and I have all that information I can share with, you know, with the survey team when they're ready to do Quays. Not a problem.
Oh, that would be great. And I'm looking at this map. So this is how they delineated it when they came to the island, but obviously they need to update this with the areas that they're defining in their table. Angus? Angus, did you want
Tom
to say?
numbers in that map.
Wait, sorry.
Oh, can you?
You're kind of cutting in and out. Can you start again?
Can you now?
Oh,
Not really.
cutting in and out.
I was going to say about Pulpus.
Yeah, that now we can hear you.
Okay, Pulpus Harbor, there's west and east. So I respect the idea that there's Pulpus completely surrounding Pulpus Harbor. You know, even though that's Quays to the left, you know, to the west of West Harbor. But yeah, just because of Pulpus Harbor, it kind of makes sense that Pulpus surrounds all Pulpus Harbor.
Well, so you're suggesting that they just be aware that, are you suggesting we need to divide and have two separate studies? One, you know, because we're going to ask for quotes. We're going to like put out an RFQ for each of these survey areas. So do you think that we should have one for Pulpus West and one for Pulpus East, or just be aware that there might be distinctions between the two, but they can be covered in one RFQ?
I think I know what Angus is talking about, because if you, for me, and there's old Quays and then there's new Quays, and new Quays is the Quays Pastures Road area, which flanks the other side of Pulpus Harbor. So maybe that's where he's coming from. Like everything that's around Pulpus Harbor would be part of Pulpus, which actually would include the Quays Pastures Road area. That's what I see what he's saying, which I would agree with that.
So do we need to, Holly, do you think we need to make some changes to this table? Because whatever ends up on this table is going to be what ends up in the survey plan.
Yeah. It's a possibility. I mean, that's where I was going with this organic kind of formation, that there's going to be lines that people have drawn that, well, wait a minute, I don't really agree with that. That line needs to come over here. So these are things that are very important. Agreed.
Tom?
Yeah, Betsy, am I not correct when I say that from the information that we were talking about, Quays to the west was delineated at the marsh in there at Folger Creek, and then to the east with Pulpus Harbor. And from what we call the road today, which might not, like Barbara said, maybe not have been exactly there, to the harbor. And that comprised all of what originally was Quays, whether it was west, middle, or east or not. It was all, that's Quays.
So I have a suggestion. Maybe we should ask them, maybe this is just the way I process information, but maybe we should ask them to take this map. Can you see the map on your screen?
Yeah.
And like update this to match the table, because they have to do that anyway, I think. And then let us look at this and see if we want to move any of the lines around or insert any more lines.
Great suggestion.
Okay. And is it okay if we handle, I think they should distribute it to everybody and people should give comments to Holly, and then we should discuss it at our, working group level. Does that sound like a good plan?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get off on a tangent here about that.
Oh, no.
I just thought that bringing up Quays would be an interesting, thing to.
Tom, it absolutely was. I'm just trying to like figure out how to get the right feedback to them. And I think if we actually can see it all on a map, we'll be able to say, you know what, this divider line really needs to move and this area really needs to be on its own. And then the other thing is, folks, if there's a lot more in this plan. So, if you think there's any resources that they haven't called out, this is the time, the period when we can comment on this interim report. And if they're just going to be pushing forward because they have a whole work schedule that they have to meet.
Does that mean, rather than discussing this, we would forward comments to Holly and to you?
Is that okay, Holly? Yes, Holly's nodding. Okay. All right, send comments to Holly, and then we will give the comment to our consultant if they could update the map and share it, because we want the map to match the table so that we can visualize everything and make sure that what they put down with the names matches, what we think it does on the map.
Right. So for instance, if you look, they've got the area of Quays, but they've got the notes as it's Quays Pastures Road. Well, it's not just Quays Pastures Road. It includes Bassett and Quays, and yeah. So
yeah. Right. They should go through the discipline of checking their table against their map as well. Okay. All right. The next thing we need to discuss is what we want to include. We need to discuss what we want to survey next, and ask for permission that from the commission that the working group can finalize the next grant application and submit it with Holly's help by the deadline, because we won't meet again until after the deadline. Betsy, you gave us terrific advice about what to start with. At the time, you and Brian Pfeiffer felt that we should start with the fish lots. Now we're only surveying 100 structures in the fish lots, so of course we could say survey the other 100, the rest of them, or as many as we can. The runner-up was the New Guinea area, West Monomoy area. And we decided to start with the fish lots because there was more information available. So it would be maybe more logical to start our survey effort where we could get our legs, like figure out, get oriented in an area where there was more information available before we jumped right into an area where maybe there was less information. So that was the thought process. What should we, and we can list, 3 things that are targets for the work, and we can decide that at a future point, but we have to put something in the application. So what should we put? I'm putting you on the spot, Betsy.
Oh, you put me on the spot.
Yeah. What's your opinion?
The whole island's a priority. So really,
Yeah.
New Guinea is hard to define. It's not really an area we can map out accurately, but it's part of that West Monomoy section that's right below the fish lots. So it kind of would make sense in one respect to finish the fish lots and just keep going south and do that area that includes New Guinea and the creeks and, the lower part of the town. But of course, another objective might be to survey the areas that are most affected by, flooding. We could do Brant Point or, the coastal areas. So it's just a matter of, if we're going to do it all, it's kind of hard to decide what's the most important or the most logical next step.
Right. Well, the other priority would be areas that are most under pressure of development. And I mean, in some, like I know in Marblehead, they decided to prioritize coastal, even though it cut across many different neighborhoods. They they considered it its own area because there were so many demolitions. I mean, yes, Mickey.
Well, Betsy mentioned Brant Point, and I think that area is a really vulnerable area right now because of, for one, it is a flood area. It's also, under a lot of pressure for redevelopment right now. We're seeing at HSAB a ton of applications for new construction, big new buildings, and additions to the old ones, and demolitions in that area. And I just think it's a valuable part of our, our I guess sort of our tourist-based history on the island in that period when it was developed. And I think it's really under pressure right now.
I agree.
Okay.
Do absolutely agree.
All right. So those are votes for Brant Point. Mary, did you have any comments about this? I don't know. Well, if you can hear us and you, Georgia?
Yeah, I'm agree. I want to put in another vote for Brant Point. I think in addition to it being valuable historically, I think the point of pointing out what the economic significance is of areas that are vulnerable to rising tides and changing climates would add a new audience maybe to the people who are going to be reading this report. I mean, there are a lot of people who are focusing primarily on climate change and the long-term effect or short-term effect of that. So I think to get that additional audience into reading about something that from our perspective relates primarily to preservation, but from their perspective relates to the economy and climate change would be helpful. So Brant Point hits both of those targets.
Yeah, I think it also allows us to discuss with our consultant. I'm going to stop sharing this row. Discuss with our consultant questions about adaptation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Holly, do you
I'm
have
curious on what you mean on that, because we do have design guidelines that were vetted through that process that follow the Secretary of Interior standards now for flooding and adaptation. So that's what the whole Resilient Nantucket effort was for. But so I do agree with everybody that's been talking about Brant Point. One, not only because what we're seeing, there's a mix of either A, wanting to build infill within the contributing lots, B, wanting to demolish something that is contributing and build something new. So there's a lot of pre-existing historic resources in there, but there was also new infill. There's also HDC surveys that were done that Macris does have for that area, So there are resources that have been documented that we know now that are not there anymore. So it would help to update Macris and the state's files as well as our own on, okay, here we had a survey that was done in the 80s. This is what the resource is, but now in 2022, it's gone. So that would be helpful. From a coastal resiliency perspective, yes, it will be helpful. But I'm more focusing on this being an area that's seeing change, but also we do have surveys that need to be updated. That's my mind process on that. Also, I do agree with Betsy on the geographic area of West Monomoy being the next kind of step down the line as far as chronology of areas that were platted. So for instance, the fish lots we know were done in 1717. West Monomoy was a little bit later, I think 1726, I think it was. So that's another, rigid geographic area that definitely needs some assistance. So that would be my choice. Also, when we have our discussion with the state for guidance, we may want to come up with, they may recommend more than just one additional area. Maybe it's 3 areas that we put in the RFQ to give the consultants some ideas, or maybe if it's even more. But I do think we as a collective group do need to come up with those areas. And I do think starting from the fish lots that we're going to have and kind of growing out geographically would be beneficial.
Yeah. Yes, and I at 3 areas was what I was thinking, and we'll discuss this with the MHC. We have a call scheduled at 12:30 today. So what I'm hearing is finish the fish lots and then keep on going. Oh, sorry.
Can I ask one question while you mentioned that? You mentioned in an email to some of us that that call, you didn't have the specifics down. It was going to be determined. I never have gotten an answer as to how we're going to do that on Zoom or on a phone or what.
Sorry, we're going to have a Zoom meeting at 12:30. I'm sorry that I only confirmed it this morning, Tom, because I didn't hear back from him at all. So I just sort of said, okay, we're talking at 12:30, right? And I heard from him.
I guess we need the link then, right?
I did email it to the working group. So you have it in your email, and I will send it to you again.
But
I'll send it to you again, Tom.
All right.
We'll make sure you get on, and I'm glad you're available. So sorry for the late notice on that. But what I'm hearing from this group is finish the fish lots and keep on going into the West Monomoy, New Guinea area. That would be, 2 things to list as options and to work out with the consultant and MHC. And then the third is Brant Point. Right? Okay. Absolutely. So that's what we'll be discussing with the MHC and in our working group.
Hillary, I do want to, sorry to interrupt, before we kind of continue down the agenda, in relationship to the report that we were just looking at, I just received an email from Jenny with PAL, and she has taken a look at my comments, but she also wanted to know if I anticipate any other comments from Nantucket. So obviously I'm going to let her know yes, but I want to obviously establish a time frame on when they need them to meet their deadline. So I would say maybe as soon as I get that deadline, I will email this commission. So that way you give me those comments by that particular date. So I just want to mention that.
Awesome. That would be awesome. Thank you, Holly. I can't remember what I was going to say. Oh, I just wanted to mention when I said adaptation, I didn't mean adaptation of individual structures. I meant the marsh nature is going to be adapting, like the marsh, the whole area is going to adapt with nature. And that's what is being discussed in the coastal resiliency plan. So then we could put that together with historic resources at that location. Okay. All right. So moving on. WPI projects, review of projects of preservation interest and NHC contribution to that discussion. It's just the 2 projects of interest to preservation were the sustainability and reuse project and the lighting and dark skies project. So I'll just frame the discussion a little bit. I included in the packet a bunch of information that I collected since our last meeting on lighting. I had discussions with Gail Walker, and I had discussions with Lauren Sinatra from the Energy Department. And Gail Walker is the Dark Skies citizen, and Holly and was included on emails and follow-ups about those. So maybe I'll start with the lighting in dark skies, because I really just wanted to give a briefing on that and get the committee's thoughts. Let me go back to sharing the packet. Okay. All right. Can everybody see streetlights?
Yep.
Okay, great. Oh, did anyone get a chance to read this?
Yeah, I read it.
So it's from 1984, and it was published in the Toledo Blade, and my husband's family is from Toledo, and they're total pack rats. And when we cleaned out my husband's mom's house, when she moved to be closer to us, we have boxes and boxes, which now are all in our house. And we discovered this clipping, and I wanted to share it. I mean, Russell Baker is, of course, such a character. And I did get some emails from people like, why is this funny? Which maybe says more about what I think is funny than what actually is funny. But this was clearly in the mid 80s when there was all of this road work being done, and they were returning certain paved streets to cobblestone. And Russell Baker commented specifically about the lighting, and, you know, saying that it was just like, this is all kind of in this colonial Williamsburg sort of style of increasing the quaintness quotient for purposes of tourism, and, you know, getting away from being an authentic town and more of, you know, a place where you dip candles and dress in costumes and stuff like that. I'm trying to find the mention of the lighting. But he says, you know, they put in these lights that are supposed to look like candles. But the point, the reason why I wanted to share it is because we have to be conscious that there's a lot on Nantucket today that was a constructed idea of what was or should have been there in the past. Oh, here it is. The light it emits, okay, has a fake gas street light installed outside his house. I remarked on the absurdity of it. The light it emits at night is a pink electric glow. One has the prurient impression of looking at the world through gauzy pink lingerie. And since there is no gas on the island, the fakery of the thing is completed by the surge of electricity needed to make it give fraudulent gas light. So now we have these lights that are all with high pressure sodium bulbs that do give a very warm pink glow, and they would be much more energy efficient if we transition to LEDs. And LED technology is getting better. It's not all white blue, it is getting warmer. There's concern that it's creating more light pollution. And light pollution, the Dark Sky group wanted me to be sure to explain, is not only from the light, but also from glare. And glare is produced by the glass globes. So we're starting to see these examples, which I'm showing now, which are compatible lights without glass globes. And the diode is up in the top here, so it shines down, and then you can put this diffuser, which hides the LED diode so you don't see it. I've included a lot of information that I discussed with Lauren, and I had her review all of this for accuracy. And also notes from discussion with Gail about what the Dark Sky people want. So I wanted just to give the commission an opportunity to comment on lights, share information on lights, and also be aware that I guess there are some lights going in at Richmond that don't have globes that we can go by and see. There's some LED lights at the hospital. Tom, I don't know if you've seen anything going in on Woodbury Lane, but Lauren thought that maybe there was something going in on Woodbury Lane.
No,
There was
I'm not aware of it.
Okay. But yeah, I just want to open the floor to comments about these globaless lights. Comments?
They're very, Hillary,
Yes.
I appreciate the theory of them. They're very weird looking, aren't they? I mean, lights that don't have bulbs. I mean, on the one hand, you sort of think they ought to have a bulb, even though it's a fake bulb, but that would be worse. I mean, I like the idea of the warmer LED lights, but gosh, they look strange. Like, why have a stanchion and a light pole when you don't even have a light bulb in it? It's very, I don't know, it's very odd.
I think it's a really interesting question. I mean, Mickey, I saw your hand also went up. Sorry, I can't see everybody's hands, so please call out, but let Mickey, yeah.
Yeah, I was just, I've been curious about these lights, the fixtures. We have various styles throughout town. And, maybe Barbara or Betsy or somebody might comment on what is historically accurate for downtown Nantucket? What was there years and years ago? What are we really looking for in terms of style? Because it's confused me.
So it's really, I'm really glad you mentioned that. It turns out when Beinecke did all this work, with changes to the town, his colleague Errol Coffin, who was his right-hand man with architectural design and creating these buildings that are contributing buildings from the 60s and 70s. He did a whole report, and it's on file in the NHA. And Lauren is getting a copy. They don't have a scanned copy, so she's getting it. But that's what led them to come up with the style of light that we have, which is called the Boulevard, with the little crown and the white top. And that's what is available for use in historic districts, not just on Nantucket. I don't know if Nantucket kind of ushered that in, but it's if you go to Lowell, that's what you see in their historic district, that boulevard. It doesn't always have the clear top, which I think would be more dark sky friendly if it didn't put light up. But that question that you just asked should be answered in part, or at least informed, by looking at this report that was done in the 60s or 70s by Earl Coffin. So why don't I distribute that, or ask Holly to distribute it to everybody when it's available?
I think one of the answers to Mickey's question would be not necessarily what Beinecke put there, but what was there originally, because they were gas lights. And somebody was responsible for going around town and lighting them every night and turning them off. And so if we have any earliest dated pictures, that is the style that I think answers Mickey's question.
Well, I'm saying that Earl Coffin did that study in the 60s to come up with what they put for today. So
was he replicating what was there, 75 years ago when the town first had gas there?
He made a decision, which we may or may not agree with, based on past records and information. So we have the chance to look at his records and information that he collected, which, given the quality of the operation, should be quite comprehensive. So I was just suggesting that as a starting point. And yeah, he did pull the Boulevard, and then the other style, which is more like a carriage light, is those were designs developed by Earl Coffin based on research from archives. Sorry, go ahead. Who was that?
I was just going to say that, Beacon Hill has, the downtown Boston area is filled with gas lamps. And those seem to be much more sort of I'm not sure what style you'd call that, but simpler. They don't have the white sort of globe thing on the top.
Yeah.
Just different style, I guess.
Yeah. And would you say they're different than, because we have that other style, which is has the four sides and the black top.
Yeah.
They look more like that, right?
Isn't that right? I mean, Beacon Hill, I'm trying to picture it now, but I think they're simpler and more black.
Yes. Yeah, they didn't go for the boulevard style.
Right.
The other thing I want to make sure everybody understands is really kind of the issue at hand, as far as the quality of the light, is that the reason why some of the lights, the decorative lights, look different downtown is in terms of the quality of their light, is that this high pressure sodium, it actually, as the bulbs age, the light changes because it's a gas that's producing the light. And as they get older, they get greener and bluer, whiter and greener. So then they burn out, the bulb burns out, and the town owns all those decorative lights. So then the DPW comes in and replaces the bulb, and it's a different color. So it's just going to be a natural case that we're going to have this, you know, crazy quilt of light colors, as long as we have these high pressure sodium bulbs. I thought that was interesting. I didn't understand that that was the case. If we convert them to LED, they will not change color. But we want to make sure that when we convert to LED, that the color is the right color. So color is expressed as kelvins. If anyone's been light bulb shopping there, they'll be familiar with this bewildering set of ratings. But the Kelvin rating is color, with 4,000 being like very white, and that the high pressure sodiums are more in the 2200 realm. Let's see, Gail, I think they're more in the 2200 area. And that now, yes, 2200 is the international recommendation from Dark Sky for color. And this is the color of our current high pressure sodiums, or at least the color they're supposed to be. And now we are getting an LED bulb to try out, or an LED fixture to try out, and it's going to be around 2400 or 2200. So Lauren said that she would let us know where they put that in and when they put that in. And the good news is that we're all communicating. You know, certainly we're a stakeholder in this discussion. If there is a more of a working group convened by our town manager, presumably we'll have a voice in that. And I just want everyone to be on notice to go around Richmond, see if you can see those glass globeless lights. And, look out for an alert from Holly or Lauren or me about other examples that we should go look at. And I imagine this will be back on our agenda when Lauren feels that we're a little bit closer to a decision point. I also want to be clear that it's the DPW is responsible for this. So this first DPW using their discretion regarding decorative street lamp repair. Okay, so it's really up to them. They're the main people who get to decide about this. And then there's the decorative lights and the Cobra lighting. The Cobra lighting is owned by Verizon. Dark Sky would like to see the town buy those, which is going to cost about $250,000 to do that, but she thinks that will be paid back. But right now the town, as far as I understand and has been communicated, has no interest in buying those. Okay, so that's all I have to say about lighting. Does anybody have anything else they want to say about the lighting, or questions or corrections, Holly, to anything I said? Okay. Okay, all right, sustainability. So Mary is on the line, hopefully, and NPT had a very exciting announcement, which is they're going to be doing more work on deconstruction and reuse and salvage by hiring a consultant to continue to study this, which is fabulous. I didn't actually include, I'm going to stop sharing because I don't have anything about sustainability in the packet. But I wanted to open for a discussion about anything, any initiative that we might get behind, or anything that we might do on this topic that was a high interest topic for us. comments? Holly, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm curious on what the commission's thoughts were on the WPI's recommendations for further research. I thought there were some really great things. This was a great group of students. I think actually the entire WPI group that came this year did a fantastic job with the town and other organizations. So it was an honor to be able to work with a group this year with the sustainability and having them coordinate with any of you all that were available to give your input on this. But I do think that they came up with some great further research, and be nice to continue some things. So just curious on what the group's thoughts are.
Anyone want to jump in?
I'm happy to. Angus.
Okay, Angus.
Well, I like the idea of some sort of plan being in place when someone, when an owner or contractor is making an alteration to a structure where there are either significant pieces of architecture that whether it's just inherently good and not wanting to throw it away, or that it's historic and somehow they're able to get away with removing it, that there is some sort of accountability between permitting and the certificate of occupancy, and the follow through on what their declaration of what they're doing ends up, sort of following through on that there would be accountability at the end of the project of, did you save everything you said you were going to, and so forth. And also just the idea of there being a place for these resources to be kept and distributed.
I thought it was interesting that it's very uncommon that the salvage depot would be run by the town, that's usually run by a private entity. But that there's a role for policies to encourage reuse, and that, there's just a number of things that need to be in place. You need to have, it needs to be doable. You have to have some place that these salvage things can go. But then you also have to have policies that encourage reuse. People aren't necessarily going to just do it on their own. I mean, whatever, we all have our own orientations and things that are most interesting. I think that there's a lot of potential to see an increase in reuse of structures if we extend the demo delay bylaw for reasons of sustainability from 60 days to a longer period. I thought it was interesting that Ray told WPI that he wanted to have some area to stage. It seemed like he didn't want to extend the demo delay. He wanted some way to let people progress in their projects by clearing their land if it was permitted, if the structure was permitted for move. But that he also recognized that sometimes it took longer than 60 days to find somebody to take the structure, and that this problem could be solved by having like a parking lot for structures. And I guess I was a little bit more inclined to say, I was less interested in the idea of a parking lot for structures because I felt it was really resource intensive and disruptive and required 2 moves and added a lot of expense. And that if we really want to see buildings reused, we have to require the person who wants to demo the building, we have to create and motivate them to be part of making that reuse happen. And the tried and true way to do that is through demo delay, which is done in towns all across Massachusetts, not for sustainability, but Did anybody have similar reaction or?
I think that's
comment?
exactly right. You know, the town and people other than the owner shouldn't be responsible for the quick removal of historic or not historic house in order for a project to go through. That the demo delay makes total sense because almost in every situation there has to be, you know, the land appropriate for the house, and the permitting and all that takes a long time. And yeah, I mean, there are some places where a number of structures are being held, um, but you know, who has that land, and is that a burden on the town for private benefit of, you know, the people who want to build whatever their idea of what they want in that new location. So yeah, the delay definitely makes sense.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that topic?
You know, I think the delay is, you know, much more important than creating a place to move a house to temporarily. I think giving people a place to put a house just makes it easier for them to remove a house. You know, I think what we're trying to do is encourage them to reuse the house in the current location. And that the delay would give, you know, them more time to plan for that or plan around it. And also maybe more time for preservation groups to do better research on the historical significance of that building. So I don't think we should be making it easier for them to move a house off a piece of property.
Okay. Any other comments? I have a suggestion, but I want to make sure to hear from everybody who wants to say something, even if they feel it's already been said. So I've been thinking about the way Nantucket groups legislate and develop new laws. And I think that we should be working all the time on improvements to our legislation, because it takes so long to really think through something and build support for something. And it seems like, you know, we're on this town meeting cycle where we can adopt new laws. Sometimes we have a special town meeting, but not all the time. And that if we start working 6 months before the town meeting, it's like, given, you know, how we have to convene public meetings and there's so many stakeholders, 6 months is not enough time. And it's not even really 6 months, because we tend to start talking about town meeting in September, and then we close the warrant at the end of March. So so nothing can really be introduced, like stuff has to be introduced really in September. So if you start thinking about it in September, you don't really have any time to develop it. So I'm thinking that as an advisory group thinking about preservation, with one of our mandates being preservation through, you know, bylaws. Obviously we can't adopt bylaws on our own. We have to convince other people that they're a good idea. That we should have an active slate of legislation that we support, and that we should be working on it all the time. And that this might be one of the things that we would develop and research, and so that it could potentially be brought to town meeting by the appropriate group, including a citizen if a citizen wanted to bring it. But I really think there's very strong reason to believe that requiring more time for these demolition delays is really one of the key ways to see more reuse and less actual demolition. Could I just go around the room and see if people support that or don't like the idea or anything? I mean, I'll start with Mickey just because I see you there. I mean, I'll just say nobody else is gonna, we can't rely on anybody else to bring this. Someone else might want to bring it, in which case we could join them. But like, if we believe that this is necessary, we have to develop it. Tom?
So what are you thinking about for more time in terms of a delay from 60 days, 90 days, 120 days?
Well, all I can tell you is that other towns that have demolition delays, it's typically 6 months to 18 months. And 12 months is quite common. I think 18 months is probably very uncommon. And I would say probably the most common is 12 months.
But just with the speed of what's going on in Nantucket, I don't see that being realistic. I mean, I agree with it, but I just don't see it being realistic with what goes on down at the Plus building.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone's going to try, I mean, wouldn't we be the ones?
Yep, I would say so.
Didn't Mary have an article that Mary Bergman have an article she proposed a couple of years ago regarding this?
Mary, are you there?
Yep.
Okay, do you want to comment?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Mickey. Let me turn my camera on. Yeah, I did. And I was just thinking that the reason why I had introduced a new bylaw was so that it would be specific to historic preservation. I thought it was too difficult to amend that other bylaw as it stands because it isn't specific to historic preservation. It's more related to sustainability and the town's desire to, reuse structures for housing, which is, again, if you look at the language in that bill, it's only dwelling. So it's not, a historic preservation, like the boilerplate bylaw for the state, is just a structure. So, whether it's an industrial or commercial or whatever else. I think as I'm listening to the conversation, I certainly can see, I've had the very same thought, but then I think, well, you got to move something twice, and that is a challenge and costs money. What I have heard just from folks that I know who have either bought or inherited property and want to move a structure on, it's the cost of a move on that is the deterrent. And I don't know what, that's like a separate topic to keep in the back of your minds. I also wonder if, certainly as private citizens, one can do whatever they want, but if the goal of this bylaw extension would be for sustainability, does that fit in with the historical commission's purview? And I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, other comments?
I'll just say that, and I think I mentioned this before, there's a reason why Nantucket does not have the standard demo delay. I think what we have could definitely be worked on, but it's in the zoning bylaw, so that would be something that obviously the zoning board would have to, or the planning board would have to be behind on. But we don't have the typical standard Massachusetts demo delay bylaw because of the HDC Special Act. That's first and foremost, and that really needs to be acknowledged. So, if this is something that this commission feels very strongly on extending that time frame, maybe this is more of a CLG discussion to get both commissions involved. HDC is a stakeholder in that because of the special act and the special power that they do have versus other communities in the Commonwealth, as well as the planning board, because they're the ones that foresee supporting anything as an amendment to the zoning bylaw. So that would be my recommendation.
So what I had thought when I said we should always be working on legislation is that we should, the suggestion is to develop a slate of things that we would like to see change that are of planning interest that we would suggest to the planning board. So we would be really actively engaging with the planning board or the planning commission and other groups where there's, cross interest, and say, these are our ideas. This is our preservation platform. Because if we're not developing it, then we're not suggesting it. If we're not suggesting it, then just nobody's going to know. So that was the idea of a platform. And I see Mary has her hand up.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to say one more thing as it relates to what Holly was saying with the special act, which was, I felt like that was really the only non-support of that article, was the fact that it was the amendment of the special act. And I think that the HDC too, to Holly's point, the boilerplate articles that have been passed in other places give the control, the demolition delay to the HC. And I think since our HCC has been doing that since 1955, certainly didn't want to take anything away from them. I think that if you were to amend that existing zoning bylaw, I think the idea of going through the CLG is a good one. It might make sense to look at what other partners are there out there in the community, like is Housing Nantucket, is Sustainable a partner, to give that bylaw more context, because it does go beyond the historic.
Yeah, I think it would be totally inappropriate for us to have a demo delay for historic structures. I mean, if it's a historic structure, the HDC should consider that, and they have the ability to completely block demolition or moves. So adding, an additional party that's trying to delay something that is the HDC's responsibility to deny, I just think would confuse, and yeah, I personally wouldn't want to support it. But we do have an issue, which is that buildings that have we have historic interiors, but we have buildings that are are preferably preserved and are not new anymore, that are getting demolished, or that the HDC is choosing to permit demolition of when they're of interest and identified for reuse, but there's not enough time. So there's not enough time to reuse them. Okay, well, I guess I'm not, yeah, Georgia.
I guess, I guess one other thought would be, following Mary's idea, partnering perhaps with somebody like Housing Nantucket. I don't know which housing entity might be the right one, but this is an issue that I've become very passionate about, the lack of local housing or housing for year-round people, and they might be another voice that would be more powerfully heard in terms of demolition delay. And whatever group is the best group to join with, I think I'd really like to have as part of it if it was possible or feasible.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I just want to remind everybody that when we identified sustainability as a topic of interest to preservation a year ago, we wanted to work with the DPW, and Housing Nantucket and Ann Crispa joined us in our discussion. And I don't see any reason why that would change. Okay, well, I'm going to suggest we just table this for now, unless anybody had any other comments. I would like to talk about the town meeting articles that we might want to comment on.
I have one last comment about
Yes.
the delay, and that is that what we're experiencing now, it seems like in the past 5 years, maybe especially in the past 2 years, is just unprecedented compared to what the HDC was faced with in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s. It's just, there's so much change underway. I've never seen so much earth moving, building destruction. It is a different landscape than it was when when these rules were put in place. So I think we have to keep that in mind.
I just wanted to make a comment on what Georgia said about bringing in Housing Nantucket. This is why I'm very giddy on the fact that our period of significance and structure, if affordable housing and historic tax credits and all that can be a great mechanism for people to say, hey, look, we want to, you know, be able to retain these structures, but also get a tax credit back on it. That's awesome. As well as put it towards our local housing. And there's so many different initiatives. So there's a lot of overlap. I think of it very, the planner in me, I look at it this way, not just from a preservation perspective. So there's a lot of different things that can be worked on.
Okay, thank you, Holly. I want everybody to take a minute to look at this solar panel citizens warrant. So I've suggested for our next CLG meeting that if we have time, we might talk about this as a CLG. I just wanted to brief everybody something that I'm aware of, which is this is the language that the citizen is suggesting. This is our special act, and they're petitioning the general court that this be inserted. And outside the town and Sconset historic districts shall reasonably allow for the visible integration of solar panels and renewable energy systems. Reasonably allow for the visible integration. Now, I just wanted everybody to know that solar is also addressed in 40C. Obviously, we're not 40C, but that doesn't mean that 40C shouldn't inform our own special act. And it says here, when ruling on applications for certificates of appropriateness for solar energy systems as defined in section, the commission shall also consider the policy of the Commonwealth to encourage the use of solar energy systems and to protect solar access. So that's how solar is addressed here. And I thought it was worth, you know, since this came from a citizen and not from the HDC, I don't know what the HDC thinks about this, but it's worth wondering why 40C decided to address it this way. Is there any material difference between these two terminologies? Is there any reason to prefer one or the other? Do we have a position? I just think that as clear stakeholders in our special act, that we have a responsibility to comment on this if we feel a comment is necessary. I guess I'm looking to.
I don't
yeah,
want to
go-
speak for the HDC, but as a staff member that works with the HDC day in, day out, as well as you all know, I've spoken about the HDC's sustainable guidelines for renewable energy, which is fair. I mean, at the end of the day, the fact that Nantucket was used as a case study for a guide for historic districts is, you know, again, awesome. And it wasn't brought to my attention that we were used as a case study until a scientist from the Union of Concerned Scientists brought it to my attention through Lisa Craig. So, I mean, that and first and foremost really tells you that Nantucket has been leading the way when it comes to renewable energy, first and foremost. Granted, we also have to acknowledge the fact that, yes, our special act was created in 55, and yes, it's been amended about, I think, 11 times, maybe less than 20 times. I can remember at the top of my head. And there is obviously a need for certain things to be updated. It's not easy. If we as the town are going to go to the state to amend our special act, there would be a plethora of things that we would want to have done, not just one minute thing. So there's that aspect. I do also want to notate the language that they've provided. They're proposing and outside the town and Sconset historic districts. What that leads the reader to believe is that the entire island is not a local district, which in fact it is. So I have concerns on that language. And again, none of this, I haven't had any discussion with the HDC. I do not know as a whole what their thoughts are on this. But at the end of the day, we do have fairly decent solar guidelines. The HDC has been really working hard on the last at least 2 years in increasing their amount of solar approvals, as well as they don't deny people outright. They go by their design guidelines, and if there's something that application is not being met, they ask the applicant, how can we work to make this so that because they obviously would rather work with an applicant than deny them. So there's that. then there's the fact that, and I thank you for providing Hillary the 40C language. I just want to caution, I think there's a little bit in that language that it may be a little bit of contradictions towards the HDC's special act. And again, the special act, created in 55, yes, it's been amended, but there's things in there that our forefathers, and that's how I like to call the folks that created our HDC in 55, didn't think of. They didn't think about all these other things that they're having, not just renewable energy, but pools, spas, and all the other things that we're seeing, the change in the landscape to try to, prohibit that view of that type of use. So there's all these different things on. At the end of the day, I do understand the intention, but I do have concerns on putting the outside of town of Sconset historic districts. It actually, because at the end of the day, they do allow. It's just that the anything that's within the old historic districts as defined by 1955 are more scrutinized. And I know both Angus and Mickey will attest to this. They give recommendations when they come before HSAB if there's something that's been proposed on a historic structure that's within the old historic district boundaries. We want to be able to minimize the visibility of it. And one case in point, which I know MPT utilized within their symposium last year, and thank you for that, was the property at, I think, 132 Main Street, that bungalow. Prime example of a historic resource that was able to utilize solar on a structure, and the visibility is perfect. You can't see it. So again, I digress. That this has not been vetted through the HDC.
Yeah. So Holly, I think the question for us is, how do we want to comment, and to whom do we want to comment on articles that are brought forth to town meeting that we have an interest in? And do we have an interest in this one? And do we just want to kind of follow the HDC, or do we want to discuss it with the HDC, or do we want to make our own comment? And to whom, as I said, would we make that? I think all your points, Holly, are well taken about, this language. Town and Sky had the same reaction, like, well, wait, what are the town? I mean, there is no town and Sconset historic district. They could say ROH and SOH as zones. But or residential old historic, which is an area that's identified under the historic district. The HDC considers the residential old historic area, and it's outlined in blue, and that's identifiable in same Wisconsin. But there's a couple really important things here. It says reasonably allow for the visible integration, which is much more wide open language than the commission shall consider the policy. Like, our special act could be amended to say the commission shall consider the policy of the town for energy sustainability and climate. We have that. So, or the commission shall consider the policy of the town regarding energy systems. That would be like a very neutral way to get that there is a town objective that we need to be conscious of, without including the words visible and reasonably allow, which is kind of a technical term that I think a lawyer has to explain what that would really mean in terms of interpretation. So I guess all of that being said, Holly, is this on any, is the FinCom going to talk about this, or is the planning board going to talk about this, or is no one going to talk about this?
That's something I need to follow up on. I don't know. So this will be the first for me as a plus staff member in the 6 years I've been here of an amendment to the special act. I don't know. So
how does the HDC
Mickey?
feel about this one?
Well, it's been brought to their attention. It has not been put on an agenda for them for discussion yet, but it's on their radar.
So do you want to put ATM articles on our agenda for next Friday for our CLG meeting, Holly? I mean, I'm suggesting that we do that. So I'd love to hear if other people agree, or because we're not going to meet again as a CLG before the warrant closes. And
I think it's a good idea.
I do too.
I do too.
okay. Holly, do you have concerns about that?
No, I mean, that would be something that I think the HDC needs to weigh in on. At the end of the day, this is for their special act. Yes, the special act does pertain to historical commission in a not direct way, but at the same time, it is their special act. So, I don't know how they feel on it.
Yeah, well, the chairs of the two groups decide the agendas. So they could certainly say, we don't want to talk about it. And then we'd probably say, okay. Okay, and then the other, so Holly, will you let us know who is actually gonna, if the planning board or the FinCom, which are the groups that typically make a motion, are going to be making a motion on this article?
I have to find out. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. And then yes, Georgia.
I have a very subversive thought about this, and you're going to laugh, all of you. I'm just wondering whether in 20 or 30 years, there are going to be so many solar panel installations that it's going to be like if it were 100 years ago and people were complaining about telephone poles. And saying, there are telephone poles all over. They really interrupt the way our landscape looks. Who wants these horrible things? But after a while, they get to be something you just look at and don't notice. Is that ever going to be the case with solar panel installations?
Georgia, you frame that in such an interesting way. And I think it gets to something that is psychologically really interesting about our species, which is that the reason why everybody just swallowed their, aesthetic sensibility and got used to the telephone poles is that telephones are beneficial for everyone. Whereas solar panels are considered to be reducing the energy expenses of the homeowner. But in fact, solar panels are beneficial for everybody as well. We just don't think about them that way.
And in the end, 50 years after that, people are burying telephone poles. So it's very hard to know this whole thing is coming full cycle, right?
It could be transient. I mean, yeah. And they're removable as well. So typically changes that are reversible are more acceptable, more palatable.
It just maybe smile to think of.
That being said, I drive around on the North Shore a lot, and solar panels are on the fronts of houses everywhere, and they're ugly as sin. They really are. They really do adversely affect the aesthetics of the neighborhood.
Yeah, I suspect over time they'll become sleeker. I think Tesla is making solar panels that are better looking and have batteries related to them that can be out of sight, that are better looking than the typical solar panel. It's like anything else, the design will improve over time.
So we need to wrap up soon. So just moving on, I think the solar, we're going to see if the HCC wants to talk about it next Friday. And I hope everybody has their calendar marked for a week from today at 1 o'clock. And the pool article. So we commented to the planning board in the past. So I just wanted to ask everybody's permission, blessing to send probably a condensed version, just voicing our support for the pool. That just we voiced our support before to the planning board, but they're actually having a public hearing that will include this article. I can't remember when it is, but that we would kind of voice our support again now that they're actually having a hearing about it. Is that okay with everyone?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, good. I'm assuming there's going to be no further discussion of the agenda for our meeting next Friday. Did anybody else want to make any other comment?
The only comment I would like to make is that I had the opportunity to be given a tour of a place called the American College of Building Arts. Holly apparently knows about this, here in Charleston, which is an amazing place. It takes 100, there are 100 kids, it's a 4-year program, and they are taught things like stone carving, plaster mold making, wood framing, as in 18th, 19th, 17th century house framing, and metalworking, as in original metalworking. I'm going to send everybody some photographs, link to their website. And they turn out graduates who are employed by preservation organizations and preservation businesses to be able to use these skills in preserving old houses. It's the only entity like itself in the country, from what I gather. And it's also relatively inexpensive to attend. I think I read $10,000 a semester, something like that. It's not a residential college, but it's a full 4-year organization. They have to take architecture courses as well. but it's unbelievable the kinds of talent that is being developed there and the kinds of work that's being turned out by these kids. And they're not all kids, incidentally. There are people who come back to it in their 40s and even 50s. But the kinds of talents that are being developed and put to work afterwards is really inspiring. So it's amazing. I had no idea it existed. Did you know about this, Holly?
I did. Yes. Unfortunately, I didn't find out about it until after I graduated Roger Williams. But when I moved down there, I did know about it.
Yeah, it's only been in existence about 20 years. It's absolutely amazing place. It's a fabulous tour. And my head is still spinning at what these people do with plaster and stonework, like
Wow.
gargoyles out of the Middle Ages, and what they're learning to do. And the plasterwork, the molds for the plasterwork on these elaborate designs are just astounding. I'll send around photographs.
Great. Tom, your hand was up?
Yeah, I selfishly, just in the interest of time, some of us have a meeting coming right up after this with MHC, so I move we adjourn.
Okay. All right. That sounds good, Susan. I'm sorry. I'm so glad you were able to join. I'm sorry that we had to discuss some of the work plan issues when Ken Bogran was with us at the beginning of the meeting, but I'd love to follow up with you about archaeology. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
I apologize, and yes, I will follow up with you right away.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. Barbara?
Those of us who are in the next meeting, is it the same link? I'm not quite sure on how
No,
that's
it's a
working.
new link and I'll be sure that you all have it in your email. Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Oh,
See you
sorry. A
all.
motion to adjourn. Okay. I think we're done.
So moved.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right.